Conservative former Brexit Secretary David Frost has released a plan to save Boris Johnson, also the Conservative Party and the country. Frost, who negotiated the Brexit trade pact with the EU in months of discussions, wrote in the Telegraph on Saturday that Johnson is currently at risk of losing popular support. Well, he already lost it from my point of view. His government seems unable to decide whether to be a traditional low-tax Tory government or to transform Britain into a European social democracy. Frost's core demand is to abolish as much state intervention and spending as possible after Brexit and to build a competitive, innovative economy with the lowest possible taxes. Our goal must be for the whole world to look at Great Britain and say, yes, they are on the right track, wrote the politician who in future wants to be a regular columnist for the ultra-conservative newspaper. But the world will look on the country and say, oh, there's a tax haven, a bad one. Frost resigned from the British cabinet shortly before Christmas when Boris Johnson slightly tightened the corona measures again because of the highly contagious Omicron variant, thereby provoking a rebellion in his own party. Frost is less interested in the Prime Minister's alleged misconduct at Downing Street lockdown parties, which could potentially lead to a vote of no confidence in Johnson. Whatever happens with Partygate, things have to get going again, he writes. So he's only caring for his money and his friends' money. Boris Johnson says Russia is spinning a web of misinformation. There will be a cascade of false claims, Johnson said in a speech at the Munich Security Conference on Saturday. Russia is spinning a web of misinformation to justify a possible invasion of Ukraine. In the past few days, there has already been false information about the alleged withdrawal of troops and other events. We knew it was coming. We've seen it before. Nobody should be fooled, Johnson warned. For days, the British government has been aggressively accusing Russia of staging false flag operations and blaming them on Ukrainian forces in order to create a pretext for an invasion. If Ukraine is attacked, the shock will be felt all over the world, said Johnson, calling on the Western allies not to allow themselves to be blackmailed in relation to a possible eastward expansion of NATO. We cannot allow our open doors to be slammed shut, said the Conservative politician. When asked what vision he had for his now independent country's cooperation with the European Union, Johnson said, "I want the closest possible cooperation." And there he's lying again. However, he also allowed himself to point out that his country had sometimes acted faster and more aggressively than our friends from the EU when it came to sanctions or warnings. London's smallest flat is set to be auctioned off at a starting price of £50,000. However, the one-bedroom apartment is expected to go under the hammer for a significantly higher sum. The flat was bought in 2017 for £103,500, The Guardian reported this week. The micro-apartment includes just space for a bed with some storage underneath, a microwave, a fold-out table, toilet and shower. There is no room for visitors, extensive cooking or hobbies. Currently, the recently refurbished flat in East London's Lower Clapton is used by a commuter for just 1 or 2 days a week, for which the report says he pays around £800 a month in rent. The sellers assume that it is the smallest apartment in the British capital's competitive market. Julia Ruck, a housing expert at the University of York, described the offer as a symbol of the worrying development in The Guardian. Micro-apartments should not be seen as a way out of the housing crisis because they are not a sustainable place to live. For example, people there are increasingly dependent on disposable products because there's no kitchen equipment. The planned lifting of the obligation to isolate people infected with corona in England has been met with criticism from experts. WHO COVID-19 officer David Nabarro described the rule change, which the British government intended to announce today, as very unwise in a BBC interview on Saturday. A group of scientists who also work for the SAGE advisory body warned that the end of mandatory isolation and the also expected end of freely available rapid tests could lead to a return to rapid epidemic growth. In a paper published on Friday, the modelers said that infections could increase by 25 to 80% as a result. According to the modeling calculated at the University of Warwick, measures such as isolation, testing and wearing masks and increased work from home help reduce the risk of infection with the virus by 20 to 45%. Earlier, senior officials in the UK Health Service had opposed ending the availability of free rapid tests. So far, these can be ordered online at home or picked up in pharmacies. In a survey of 300 leading NHS officials, around three-quarters were also opposed to abolishing the obligation to isolate infected people. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland decide independently about their corona measures and often take a more cautious approach than England. The Omicron wave, which peaked in Great Britain at the turn of the year, has been flattening out for weeks. The last 7-day incidence was 565. British Home Secretary Priti Patel announced stricter anti-espionage laws. In her opinion, because of the increased activity of Russia, which is set to threaten the national security of the United Kingdom, the government will take the initiative. The Sunday Telegraph informed about this. The Home Secretary has indicated that she will use all her powers against individuals who seek to harm the state and democracy. She added that those involved in the crimes pose a threat to internal and global security, which is why London and allies around the world will use migration checks laws and levers against them. She's using this crisis for her own purpose again. But I will go one step further and introduce a bill that completely overhauls our powers to counter foreign threats and updates our outdated espionage laws, Patel said. Earlier, British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss said London plans to ban Russian oligarchs from entering and moving capital in the event of an invasion of Ukraine. She added that the plan is to make it more difficult for Russian companies to access capital and government bond markets. The North Westphalia Chamber of Industry and Commerce here in my hometown is doing everything it can to increase trade sales with Great Britain again. Don't give up is the motto that the general manager, Dr. Fritz Jäckel, once again underpinned in a view on the figures published on February 18th. According to the Federal Statistical Office, the United Kingdom fell from 7th to 10th place in the ranking of Germany's most important trading partners in 2021. In 2017, the year after the Brexit referendum, the United Kingdom was ranked 5th. Brexit has made business with the UK unnecessarily expensive and difficult, but not impossible, said Jäckel, and no more complicated than with the US or China, and I still believe Jäckel is wrong there. Giving up a market with almost 70 million inhabitants right on the doorstep of the EU is no alternative for the chief executive of the IHK North Westphalia. The IHK North Westphalia, which together with the IHK Ostwestfalen is the North Rhine-Westphalian main IHK for Great Britain and Ireland, and is therefore supporting a comeback of companies in foreign trade with the United Kingdom with numerous practical tips and individual advice. In the past year alone, around 2,700 individual consultations were held. A total of 1,720 IHK member companies from all over the state also used 12 online events to find out about the effects of Brexit on business practice. In addition, the IHK continues to work directly, but also via the DIHK and the network of foreign chambers of commerce to simplify trade regulations. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Saturday that if Western nations fail to fulfill their promises to support Ukraine's independence, it would have damaging consequences worldwide, including for Taiwan. Russian troops are massed near Ukraine's borders, and President Vladimir Putin has launched exercises with strategic nuclear missile forces, but Russia rejects Western concerns that it poised to invade. We do not fully know what President Putin intends, but the omens are grim, Johnson told a security conference in Munich. If Ukraine is endangered, the shock will echo around the world, and those echoes will be heard in East Asia, will be heard in Taiwan, he added. People would draw the conclusion that aggression pays, and that might is right. China views Taiwan as part of its territory and has not ruled out to use force to regain control of the island, which has governed itself since 1949. Johnson said Western nations had repeatedly told Ukraine that they would support its independence. How hollow, how meaningless, how insulting those words would seem if at the very moment when their sovereignty and independence is imperiled, we simply look away, he said. But I don't really know what he means, but we will not go in there with troops, and Johnson knows that. On Tuesday, Britain said it could block Russian companies from raising capital in London and has passed legislation to widen sanctions on Russian businesses and individuals if the country invades Ukraine. He said, "We will sanction Russian individuals and companies of strategic importance to the Russian state and we will make it impossible for them to raise finance on the London capital markets. Europe must also wean itself off Russian oil and gas supplies to stop being at the risk of being blackmailed, he added. Or the von der Leyen said we are already prepared to go to zero in the case of an invasion. Immediately. Johnson predicted Russia would pay a heavy military price if it invaded Ukraine. He said, I fear that a lightning war would be followed by a long, so blitzy means, followed by a long and hideous period of reprisals and revenge and insurgency. And Russian parents would mourn the loss of young Russian soldiers, he said. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.